So, welcome everybody to ART360 edition 4 talks, and these talks are all about the artist studio. As we're getting the gist of this now. We're coming towards the end of the recording. So, yeah, this is about the artist studios, and welcome to everyone who's joined us to ask their questions, etc. Tonight we're joined by Vincent Matthews. Hello, Vincent.
Hello, Leslie.
I love it when people say it's like the BBC, and it's the BBC calling from Jodhpur or wherever they used to do it. It sounds very, very formal when people go, "Hello, Leslie."
From your attic.
From my attic, exactly.
It's your studio.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, Leslie calling from her attic. Very funny. A snowy attic at the moment, isn't it? So as I said, excuse me, this edition 4 is all about studios. So we can see you're sitting in your current studio, and there's an amazing oil painting behind you, which we will obviously be talking about at some point during this conversation. But can you tell me your first recollection ever of your very first experience of a studio, whether it was yours or somebody else's?
Well, basically, I remember as a young teenager when I used to, on a Saturday morning, do some oil painting in my dad's workshop with a lovely old lady called Pato, who was teaching me the oil painting techniques. And his workshop was an old First World War mortuary. So you can see the mark of the slab on the floor. And it's sort of wasn't the sort of place you want to be in when it got dark. So myself, my brothers, and my sister, we always used to make a run for it when it got dark in that workshop. So I remember that, and then I remember before I went to art college at 16, did a commission. I painted at home in the sitting room because the client kept coming into the workshop, and people complained about the smell of turps and the fact I'd flicked paint on the ceiling, so that wasn't very good.
Your mum wasn't very chuffed with you doing that.
No. Although the client was very chuffed with the painting, but yes.
Did your brothers and sisters paint as well then, or was it just you?
My younger sister is a very talented artist. She can paint and draw very well. She didn't go to art college. But she did her A-level art, and she did art history. We've been to exhibitions together in the past. So yes, she's very, very talented, but she prefers to keep it as a hobby.
And did the two of you paint together in the mortuary?
No, thank you. I don't think she would have appreciated that so much. But yes, I spent many an hour in that workshop. And I remember my dad having a newspaper interview, and he was asked to describe his job. So he described it as a dead-end job, which was quite funny. He had quite a sense of humour.
You can see where you get your sense of humour from.
That's right. I had a friend who I grew up with from the age of 12. I knew him. His father was an artist. He was more of a glass artist as well, but he did do some painting. And he had a friend who was a mosaics artist, and another one who was a fantastic painter. So I did get to see his father's studio, which was a drafty old barn, basically, old stables, which was just in the grounds of their Victorian house. But really, this is my first studio. When I did my fine art course, I was painting at home in my dining area, which was a tiny little area in a tiny little two-bed semi, which was like a little 1930s cottage. I remember doing my painting during my fine art course, and I had to do an experimental abstract which involved lots of flicking of paint. So needless to say, the walls, the ceiling, the carpet were actually covered in paint. In fact, I had a girlfriend at the time who used to call me Mikey Messi because she could see where I'd been around the house when I'd been painting. Could have been thumbprints everywhere, the doorknobs, on the telephone. And I had a design studio upstairs, which was in the second bedroom. So I had my drawing board, my computer, and my printer up there, which was quite pleasant. But it all got too small because around about 2009, 2010, I was getting really busy on the work front, needing more room. But I started to get into galleries. I did my first open studios at Sealed Chart Etchers with Tim Constable, who's a cabinet maker. And that was a nice studio environment. And from that, I then submitted to the Wadhurst show, got into Fringe show, then was in the Art Loco gallery, and it went from there. It got to the point where I really needed a studio because I didn't have enough space. So I was moving down here anyway. My mother had died the year before, but she'd been keen for me to move down here. And I've been doing all of my artwork. And I used to come down with a girlfriend a weekend. I'd be sitting in the mud on my stall, sketching, while she'd be browsing around in the shops, in the coffee shops, all nice and warm. So I used to come down every weekend. And of course, I've got some family in the area, some friends in the area. So, yeah, so I ended up in this house. It wasn't what I was looking for. The one I was looking for was a period house, but it was already under offer. And it turned out all the period houses, not only do they drink all your money, they're much more expensive. So I bought a modern 1980s house, which people are surprised about, but it's very similar in a way to what I grew up with. But it had a converted garage, which is 6 meters by 3 meters, probably a bit longer than 6 meters. Which is perfect. And then it had a big enough spare room for my design office.
So when you looked around the house, did you immediately think, oh my goodness, that is perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for in a studio?
Well, what drew me was the light. I mean, the sitting room and dining room were open plan. I removed the doors that separated because they were annoying. But it was a quality of light, big windows and good sized rooms. I don't like being squashed up in claustrophobic environment. And the studio, I just walked in straight away and I thought, yeah, that could work. And I was in a pretty desperate situation where I really needed to do it because I was getting so busy with the design and so busy with the art. It's just weird. And the day I was here and put the offer in, he said, I got an email message from Pure to say I'd got into their first show.
Oh.
So
it was fate. Look at that. So do you still keep your design studio and your painting studio separately?
Well, I did for a long time, but then I got a dog who doesn't do stairs. And he likes his company. So I had to bring the drawing board downstairs into my studio, which was quite a performance because I had to take it apart. And whilst I was trying to get it into the studio through the door, he's blocking my path. And then while I'm lying on the floor trying to put the screws together, he's licking my face. So it was a great help, it was.
This was Denby.
Denby, yeah, big company. So I've got the drawing board in here. I did used to use it a lot for my art as well, for drawings in the old days. But so I still have my design office, but it's mostly used for storing pictures and design stuff in now and reference books. But it sort of works. And when I've got to do a lot of design work, sketch form, which is most of the time when I do design, I sit at the dining table now and I've got a view out the French window. Denby's happy because he can see me. But I've got a printer in here as well now, which is handy, which I use for both the art and the design. And so I haven't got to walk far, but it's got a door on it, which is really important because when I finish up, I don't carry on beyond 5. I shut the door and I don't go back in the room unless I have to get anything. And it's a way of keeping things fresh and not overworking things because that's important. But
so what about your admin? Because this is something that people have said is they don't take their computer and they don't do their admin in their studio. Do you
I definitely don't do my admin in here. Quite every morning when I finish walking the dog and have my breakfast, I have to have a mug of tea and I'll sit and look at my computer for half an hour, answer all the emails, look at social media, all of that kind of thing. And then I get myself a proper coffee to get my head going. And then I either come into the studio to work on my painting, or I start work on the dining table with drawings or my design work. I'm semi-retired from design now, which is working quite well in some ways. The money would be helpful, but I'm enjoying life. And I'm finding now that the time scales are nowhere near as rigid as they used to be. You know, I find I've got half a day's work, so I'll start on that by 9:30, 10 o'clock latest, and then by the afternoon I've finished. So then I'll walk the dog, come back, come into the studio, or start sketching something. So it's quite well, it's quite flexible.
You have quite a structure to your lifestyle then. You're quite disciplined in how you spend your time, would you say?
I am quite disciplined. Although with that cold last week I had, that did go out the window somewhat. I didn't really come in the studio to do much in the way of painting. I did a bit of design work early in the week, but that's the other advantage now. If I get something like that, I can just stop, just fight it, get rid of it, and then get on with my life again. But I do have experience of other studios. I used to use Brenda Hartill Studios a lot for my etchings and for my engravings. Used to quite often prepare the plates here, and then you go and use the acid bath at Brenda's and the aquatint box and her press. I ended up getting another press of my own, which was helpful. My then girlfriend helped me with it. But I don't really use that now because my practice has changed. It's mostly drawing and painting and watercolour nowadays.
Yeah, we can see behind you. Do you think you can, I don't know whether this is possible, but do you think you can do a kind of like show us around your studio kind of thing with your...
Well, I can try.
Because we can see the oil painting. Oh, there we are. That's the massive painting that you've started.
Yeah, the big one.
Wow.
So I'm still making bits blocking in under painting as I go. And
they're on and those paintings are on easels, are they?
Yeah. Yeah, that's on a big easel. I had to rejig my whole studio for it. And I ended up getting a cheap camp table next to it for my paints and stuff, because when you're painting, if you're right-handed, you need the daylight to come from your left side, otherwise you're working your shadow, and ideally you'll paint stuff to your right-hand side because you're right-handed. So it's worked out quite well. I don't know if you can see anymore. This is my drawing board. I'm just going to flip it around, and then
there's the printer. There's the press,
and the press.
And then you've got lights over there. So what do you use the lights for?
I got them to photograph my work. And they've got diffusers on them, but they're still quite bright. They're so bright I have to push them far away. I still use them occasionally. They're very good daylight, but I actually found a better alternative. I got an LED, which I'll show you in a minute.
Okay. And then I've got all the way around.
All the way around.
There we go.
So yeah,
we're back to you now.
Back to me now. Yes, I've got a very good light here, which is basically on a stand, and I can tilt it, I can dim it, and it's brilliant. So I use that for my painting. I prefer daylight, but that's very good light, and so I use that much more. And I prefer to use natural light to photograph my work in my conservatory in the morning when the light's the other side of the house, so it's soft. Because most artist studios ideally should face north, and the reason for that is you get a consistent, constant, even light. You don't get any shadows, you don't get any glare, you don't get any strong sunlight. That's why most studios, you look at a lot of the arts and crafts studios, the Victorian studios, all of the windows face north.
And that makes sense, doesn't it?
My sun comes through my front window, so sometimes that's a bit strong. So I use the blinds, and sometimes I have to put paper over the vertical bit of the blind because you can get glare come through. Light is amazing, like water, it will find its way through.
Yeah, yeah. But you have blinds there to help you with that. But do you use your studio all year round?
I do now, yes. As you know, I've often been a plein air sketcher, and I've done plein air painting as well, watercolour outside. And, I'm not doing that as much at the moment because working from imagination, I can almost go to any place in my head.
So talk to us about the one behind, because that's taking there's some quite motifs and interesting little stories, dialogues going on in the one behind us. Talk us through this one.
With all my paintings, I like the viewer to make up their own story, but it's using my design background. Everything in that room, from the bookcases, the secret door, the fireplace, the mirror, the carpet, has been designed by me, and it all works. But it's called the bookworm, and it's a play on words, and it's a worm reading a book. And if you look carefully in the mirror, there's a bird in the mirror. And what do birds like? And there's a little
poor worm.
That's right. And the footprints leading into what some would call a kitchen, or some posh people would call it a butler's pantry. So yeah, so there could be something sinister going on there. But the bookworm's oblivious, is happily engrossed in his book.
Yeah, and there's one of your cones just peeping around the corner in that pantry, isn't there?
Right. Well, I love that randomness of it, which is one of the things I liked about Magritte's work and Dali's work. I mean, Magritte especially, because he liked playing with things like trains coming through fireplaces, apples on faces. It's that sort of randomness, really.
Yeah.
And intrigue. But when you're dreaming, I mean, your dreams are random.
Are you inspired by anyone? You mentioned Magritte and Dali there. Is there anyone else that inspires you?
Well, I did Chirico as well. He does quite architectural painting with a lot of shadow and perspective. I like that. And of course, he uses nondescript sort of figures. They're almost like robots, really. Yeah, there were a number of artists that I have seen. When I went to the Surrealist show at the Tate, that was quite mind-blowing because it was such a diverse range of surrealism. A lot of the South American surrealists were political. Whereas I don't put politics into my work. But yeah.
There's always a lot of animals in your work. You feature animals a lot.
Well, yeah, well, didn't used to. I mean, all my Christmas cards have always got a dog in it, Denby, or my last one, Smokey. My painting I'm currently working at the moment's got a giant elephant in the room.
There's an elephant in the room.
Elephant in the room. And if you look carefully, there's a little clockwork mouse as well in the corner. Because elephants are scared of mice. And I've got one up on the wall if I can find it. Yeah, the one up here, I've got a bird in one of them as well, which is the Buccaneer's Folly, which is glimpsing through a hedge. So yes, I mean, these take time to do these paintings, but especially as they're coming from my head a lot of the time. I do sometimes refer to sketch reference material. Sometimes I need to look at an image to get an idea. And then once I've got that idea in my head, I then sketch it without reference to the image. There's just something magical about working from your imagination and your memory.
Yeah, it's a combination, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah,
so you moved on to this oil painting during lockdown. Do you still do your sketching regularly? Because I know you're the curator of the SGFA. So how are you fitting those two lives together? The one where you're doing the drawing and for the Drawing Society.
Well, I have been doing some sketching, not recently because of the weather, but I've sketched in a friend's garden. I've been out sketching. Well, we went for a pure drawing day, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
And I sketched at Watts Gallery, where we had a fabulous exhibition. I can recommend Watts Gallery. I mean, it's a beautiful location,
Mm.
fabulous galleries, more than one gallery. There's a commercial gallery, and then there's the one which is dedicated to the Pre-Raphaelites, really. And they've got this fabulous church there, which is worth seeing as well. It's a beautiful place. So inspirational. I can show you the sketch I did. If you hang on a second. Of course, I'm still sketching with my drawings for imagination. They all come from my sketches. So this is.
And you do an under sketch, don't you, onto the canvas?
Well, I plotted out a long handled brush and paint on the canvas. But I mean, this was one that, if you can see, last one I did at Watts Gallery.
Wow.
Sat there with the cars coming through, past me, and chatting to me, trying to get my head around the perspective. And this was one I did waiting for my car to be serviced. So I went and sat in a churchyard, a little bit of haven in what is a very, very busy road, and a lot of building work going on around there. So that was a nice little haven. Sketching Friends Garden.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. So you are keeping, that's July 2022. So I know that the SGFA have got a show at the moment in Bermondsey, in the art space in Bermondsey.
We finished that last Saturday. So we collected our work.
And what did you show in that?
I showed ink drawings. I've got such a huge stock of framed ink drawings from lockdown. So I put 3 there. I have the Dungeness Lighthouse, which was done from sketches. When I sketched on location, I didn't like the modern buildings blocking my view, so I sketched the lighthouse, went round the back of the modern buildings and sketched the rest in, and it was like the buildings never existed. So that was my ink drawing. I did one of the watch house the Black House in Rye Harbour, and I also had the slim timber building, as I called it, which was in Winchelsea.
I know the one you mean. Yeah.
So there was those 3 as a set.
Because you did a lot of that kind of work, that detailed work of like domestic items, didn't you, during lockdown?
Yes, I did. I did my daily sketch, didn't I? 110 of them.
Yes, 110 daily sketches. And did you sit in your studio and do those sketches, or did you do them just on the dining room table, like you were saying?
Well, yeah, a lot of my sketches, I either did them on the table or I sketched in the garden. I sometimes sketched them in the sitting room. I'll be sitting in the sketch room. I even sketched in the utility area, which is the size of a broom cupboard, and my cloakroom downstairs. So it was all over the house and over the garden as well.
So you actually just go and sit in there and sketch what's in front of you?
That's right.
Oh, wow. Fran is asking, do you find you need your head to be in a different space when you are painting from imagination as opposed to when you're plein air sketching?
Yes, I would say so, because plein air sketching, you're just interpreting what you're seeing in front of you with marks and lines. Whereas working from imagination, there's an element of that, because I might be using some sketch reference material, but it's mostly out of my head. So yeah, I find I need to be somewhere without distraction, really, in a quiet space.
One needs lots of distraction because you're outside and you're literally looking and seeing and recording, and the other one needs peace, does it?
That's right. It's quite interesting mindset. I've got my sketchbook here. But these are the sketches that I did. That's a preparatory sketch I did for the one behind me.
Oh yeah.
And working it all out, working out the colours, working out the details, and sometimes I shift things around on the canvas. See if I've got any others. That's another one I did.
Do you, when you're working like this, do you listen to podcasts, or do you have the radio on, or do you have it all quite quiet?
Oh, I quite often have a radio or something on in the background, I'm not necessarily listening to it all the time, but it's sort of like it's soothing.
Yeah.
And also it helps keep Denby quiet, because I learnt this with the kennels. If you have Radio 2 on, the dogs behave themselves, go quiet. If you change the channel, they don't like it.
So you have the radio on more for Denby than you do for yourself?
That's right. But when I'm in my studio on my own, I quite often put the radio on, then I will listen to some of the conversation while I'm working, and some of the music. I mean, some of the things, you know, this is a tribute to Dali, really. Instead of a lobster, it's a fish on the phone. So just working out sketches. But sometimes I can't get my head around certain things. I'll go up the road and have a look. You know, this one I also did.
So you went up the road and found a banana and looked at it for a bit and thought, yes, that's how a banana boat would look.
Well, if you remember a conversation we had, I said, I think there's something missing. You said, well, let me put something more random in. So I thought, oh, I'll put a banana in. So I drew it and I cut it out and stuck it in. So I worked out the composition.
And it looks great, doesn't it? And just finally, Vincent, you have a very distinct colour palette.
Right.
You have quite a muted, quite historical colour palette. Is that deliberate?
I think it's partly me, and I do like bright colour, and all the colours are subtly different. I love mixing colours. I mean, all my colours, apart from one or two earthy ones that I use, are largely mixed from primaries, warm and cools. And I like that. I think it's partly perhaps it's many years of working in Colfax and Fowler as well, where it was all about taste and not being shouty and all of that. And some of the blings coming behind me from having worked with Ali Dad as well in Kuwait and places like that, where they like their bling, their gold. So I think that's probably what's influenced me.
Yeah, because you started black and white, didn't you? And then gradually a bit of colour came in.
Well, it did. During the lockdown period, I was doing my ink drawings, and then my ink drawings I started to add colour from memory and imagination, and that was in watercolour. And then doing the making module with you, we did a bit of oil painting, which the painting's behind me. And I said, well, I've missed painting. I really loved it. I missed it. And it was your clever suggestion, well, try painting from imagination. And that's where it all kicked off, really.
I think it was more of a conversation than me telling you.
Sure, but the interesting thing is it's also multidisciplined in a way. It's brought in my love of painting, my love of colour, my drawing, but it's also brought in my design and architectural background into all my work. It's like they've all fused. And when I worked with people like Colfax and Fowler and various design companies, I work with interior decorators, I'm not allowed to do colour, everything's all black and white. Whereas here, I can do whatever I like.
Yeah.
And
do you feel happy, Vincent?
I do, yes. I don't feel my head is stuck in a fog like it used to be. I used to be so caught up with super urgent deadlines and all the insecurity of not knowing when work comes in. It still happens to a point. But it was very hard to get my head out of that groove. So if I went out sketching, it'd be sketching buildings. And then if I did ink drawings, it would be tight ink drawings. So I was still caught up in that design mode. Whereas now I feel much more relaxed and more confident, and it's not a race, there's no deadline. I don't do super urgent deadlines anymore, refuse to do that. Not what life's about. The quality of life is not about that. So I just take my time, and it's not a race. And it's like each picture I do is like painting a book. It's got its own little journey. And each one you approach slightly differently. We're now working big and having to because the bigger scale. So I'm much happier.
I know you wrote a blog, didn't you, about painting the bigger painting?
I did, yes. One thing I should have mentioned in there is I had to completely rejig my whole studio to fit my big painting. It took me a day and a bit moving furniture and stuff around in the studio. But it's worth it because now it feels better than it ever has, because it's like being at a workstation while I'm painting. So I can just be in my zone. I stand up, I sometimes sit down, I've got a stool, I've got a chair. Depends where I am on the picture as to whether I sit or stand. So it's good to have that variety to move around, because it's important with posture to keep your back straight and not to strain your shoulder, because people confuse things with drawing and painting. They think you always draw from your wrist. You don't. You draw from your shoulder. You draw with your body. So you have to be very conscious of where your arm is. Our arms are not made for that. That's straining your joint. They're made for that and lower. So I'm always conscious of that. You could tell I did the Alexander technique years ago. I learned a lot from a man called Alex, of all things.
But it'll help you carry on working and painting for many, many years, won't it? If you care about your posture and you don't just ignore that and think, oh, it'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean, slouching over a table is very bad for your posture, working big. I know I had to do a little bit of that with my bulldozer picture. I was standing a lot of the time, and because I couldn't make a mistake with the dip pen, I was walking around the table. I was drawing upside down sometimes, because I was very conscious of the fact I needed to keep the angle of my arm and my nib at the right angle, and I need to be able to move with the line. Whereas when you're painting on an easel, it's like life drawing. A lot of people nowadays don't have their easel up, they'll work on a table, which I can understand, because a lot of us artists have had shoulder history problems. So it's difficult. But I've been known to stand a table on its end and stick a piece of paper on that, because when you're working that way, you're seeing it as it really is. You're not relying on memory of something that's horizontal to something vertical. You don't have to then keep moving it from horizontal to vertical to see how it looks. It can get very distorted working horizontally, because you're relying on memory. Whereas if it's up in front of you, you can stand back. Oh, no, that needs straightening up. Or no, I need to move this over to make that work better. So yes, so I prefer working from doing oil painting, prefer to work on an easel.
Yeah, and as you say, sometimes standing up, sometimes sitting down, but always being mindful of how you are holding your body.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
do you have a time frame you work in? So I'll work for 4 hours, or I'll work for 6 hours, and then I'll stop.
I generally find, and I remember my course director on my fine art saying this, and he was an outstanding painter, and he used to say, very few artists can work intensely painting more than 4.5 hours. And I would say that's spot on. That's about my maximum. But I still have breaks. So I'll have a coffee break. I'll have my lunch break. In the winter months, I have to take Denby out a bit earlier. It gets dark earlier. So I'm looking forward to spring, when I can actually come in here and make more use of the light. But it's good. The other good thing about that, I always remember him saying, people always think the Impressionists went out and bish bash bosh painted it. They didn't always. He said people like Van Gogh used to come back, they'd put it on his easel and sit staring at it for a while, and then go back maybe the next day. The paint's getting a chance to dry as well, and having a bit of thinking time. And I think if you limit because you're more productive in 4 to 4.5 hours than you are stretching it out late in the evening when you can't see your colours under artificial light. But it forces you to have these regular breaks as well. So you rest your eyes, especially if you're doing lots of very fine mark making on drawing. It's important to rest your eyes periodically. And also it's good to rest your body. But when you come, because you can go cross-eyed, you come back into the studio, look at your work afresh, it becomes obvious what you've got to do. Otherwise, it's the risk of overworking everything.
Yes, because you watch them on these like portrait artist of the year and landscape artist of the year, and they are just like going. They don't have time, do they, to have that moment to walk away and contemplate. And I always think that's a bit sad, because as you say, you stop seeing after a while.
With all respect, I think it's completely and utterly bonkers. Because most serious portrait painters don't paint in 4 hours. You know, Lucian Freud used to take 1,000 hours to do his paintings. His painting took 1,000 hours. I'm not saying I'm that slow. I've done life painting, which we've got 15 minutes, half an hour. That's great. It's an exercise, and then you get longer on the longer pose, working in a crew. But if you want to do a really serious finished work, if you look at Svetlana's work, you couldn't do that in 4 hours.
No, Svetlana's
It's a bit of a gimmick, really.
her portraits take a long, many months to do, don't they?
5 months.
Yeah, they're beautiful, and she's very talented. Yes, I was intrigued with that process because, as you say, I always think with anything in life, you need to stop, walk away, take a bit of a breath, come back, and just see what you didn't see in the first place. So, yeah, it's reassuring to hear that you do that as part of your
my painting
discipline.
I mean, I've been averaging 3 days a week on my paintings, and the way things are going, I think it'll probably be more than that. Because I'm also have a life now, which I didn't really have much of before. I didn't really have much of a personal life, which I am enjoying now, because that's what life's about. It's not about chasing the megabucks, although we all like to have some money.
Yeah, it's going to Paris, isn't it? And going to Manchester and doing all the fab things that we've been doing this year, which has been great. Birmingham.
That's right.
Yeah, we've had great times. Thank you so much, Vincent. That's really fascinating, and I think really enlightening for people to listen to how you approach your work and how you use your studio space, and not be afraid really to move things around.
No, you're absolutely right. You have to move things around as circumstances change to do your best work.
Thank you so much. That's brilliant. And thank you everyone who was listening. If you have any more questions, let us know. But this recording will be uploaded, and then anyone who's missed it will hopefully be watching it now. And it'll be on our website and on our YouTube channel. And Vincent's website and contact details are all on the Pure website under the artists. And it'll also be on the YouTube channel. So thank you very much, Vincent.
No, thank you.